Thank you all for coming to the second lecture in this year's lecture series on class theory. I'm glad to see more people than we expected, given that it is the opportunity for a long weekend was there, and it's nice to see that so many people preferred to come to listen about class theory, especially since today is, of course, the day of anti-fascist struggle. So class theory certainly is something that we can relate to this. So today's lecture, as you will probably have already seen, will be discussing class theory. Professor Demirović is a professor at various universities. I think in Zurich now.
No, in Frankfurt.
Still in Frankfurt.
Yeah.
What you will be discussing today is to what extent the concept of class is still a valid concept to conceive of the complexities of current capitalist societies, especially in the context of subjects such as, and I'm citing now from the abstract, which most of you will probably have read, precarious life conditions, sexist violence, the exploitation of nature, the exhaustion of subject, depth of private and public households, and so forth. So the question is whether, if we expect to accept this as the diagnosis of current phenomena of the capitalist societies we're living in, to what extent can this still be connected to the question, to an analysis based or including the concept of class. So I will stop here. I hope I didn't mangle your abstract too much. And now, please, Professor Demirović.
Ja, so wie lange soll ich denn? 13 Minuten? 14 Minuten?
Ja, 40?
40 Minuten, okay, good. Ja,
još jedna stvar, molim sve da se potpišu na ovu listu, to nam treba zbog interne evidencije. Eto, hvala.
Okay, I thank you for the invitation and give me the chance to present some of my ideas here in your context, and hopefully it is helpful for you and to get some impression what the discussion is about. We have in Germany, in some parts of the left, my background is that I'm a senior fellow in the Rosa Luxemburg Stiftung in Berlin. I'm teaching political theory and some kind of critical theory in Frankfurt and also in Basel in Switzerland. And in general, yes, my field is more political theory and state theory of democracy. I'm not an expert in social structure or in class theory, but nevertheless, yeah, I mean, in our context and in the journal Procla, we had several issues on the problem on classes, the development of classes, and also in the context of Marxist state theory. In the German debate, we had a lot of discussions about the role of classes and how to reconceptualize the problem of class. I think, as it is said in the exposé, the outline of the whole lecture series, the problem is that the concept of class is under attack, or there is a lot of criticism of this concept. Is it plausible to refer to this concept, to the tradition of class theory, or wouldn't it be better to give it up because there are so many misleading associations with related to this concept? So what I want to do basically is to give you an idea how, in my eyes, it is possible or it is worth to defend the concept of class. With regard to the social structure of a country like Germany, there is the argument that there is no working class anymore. Yeah, in a structural sense, people say, sociologists say, there is of course some inequality, but this doesn't mean that there is class. And then one argument is, I'm sure you know this, I mean this is a very general argument, that class is defined not only by structural features, yeah, that means the control over the production, the means of production, but class is more defined by a kind of a Weberian aspect, that means the milieu, the cultural way how people act, how they live, the way of everyday life, yeah, that is conceived of the most important feature of a class identity, and includes also the way of organizing and acting. And so already in the 60s and 70s, sociologists in Germany, some from the very conservative side of the political spectrum, yeah, like Schelsky, have argued that there is only middle class. Everybody is a member of the middle class. And this is also true when you go to Japan. I mean, when you ask people in Japan, 85% of the people would say they are member of the middle class. Yeah, so they like to see themselves as middle class people. You know, have a certain income and, you know, have the food and have children in school and so on. So they see themselves not as poor and so on. So, but in fact, we have in Germany, like in Switzerland, like in Austria, we can say that 15, 18, 20% of the population is poor, just only poor. Yeah. So we have about 36 million people are depending on wage labor in Germany, and that means 8 million of them are precarious. Yeah, what is a huge amount of people living on a very low level of income, of social security standards, on the way how food supply and so on and so on. So, you know, only Germany and Germans see themselves as world champions of tourism, but in fact only a 50%, yeah, what is not the self-awareness of Germans, you know, only 50% of the population can afford to have vacation time, yeah, and spend money for vacations, yeah. So many people are poor, but it's not part of the self-consciousness of the German society. And then when you speak in empirical terms, you could say never in the history of capitalism are so many people proletarians than since the 90s and the 80s and 90s. You know, with the extension of capitalist production all over Eastern Europe and all over China, you have a huge amount of people becoming proletarians, depending on wage labor. I mean, when you see the labor market development in China, you could say this, that you know, many of this production work we formerly had in Germany is now exported to countries like Thailand. The textile industry, the construction of shipyards, the construction of ship, yeah, is brought to South Korea and South Africa. The coal mining, the production of iron and steel, all these kind of things, yeah, are now done in other countries. So what we have since the 80s, yeah, we have a new international division of labor, and so this kind of exhausting and hard manual labor is more or less concentrated in other parts of the world, but not in Germany. So like in parts of the US or in Germany, the work is more and more concentrated on kinds of intellectual work, development, planning, and marketing, and these kind of things. Though this is a kind of a general background for my argument, that what I want to say is that to come to a more theoretical aspect of the problem is that during the last decades in the left and the Marxist theory, class theory was seen as something dealing with the problem of social structure. Class is seen as something that exists as a structure. That means two classes, the bourgeoisie, the proletariat, and defined as under the perspective of the control of the means of production. The one class owns the means of production, and the other class is depending on it and is depending on the control and the control and the domination of the bourgeois and ruling class. So you have on the one side you have a class basis, that means a structural level of society with the two main classes. And then one of the criticisms was since the 70s and 80s that this structural model cannot explain what was called and still is of course called class struggle. In which way can class struggle be explained? And what does it mean when we say, and this was a serious problem for the left in the 60s and 70s and broadly discussed, when we speak in terms of class, we would say, okay, we have this kind of essential or substantial class identity, working class, bourgeoisie, but in fact, where can we see the impacts of class existence? Because there haven't been any struggles on the street. I mean, people have this idea that class struggle has to happen on the street, occupation, strikes, and so on, So, and so what people then argued at that time was there is no class struggle. The working class is integrated in Germany, so people became private consumers. They live in a very privatized way, high consumption, with cars and the consumer goods like wash machines and refrigerators and TVs and so on. And then in the next decades you have all these, what too is, the computers, the personal computers, and then laptops and smartphones and so on. So people are always kept busy to have these new consumption goods, and this privatizes people, and they do not organize themselves and do not fight against the exploitation. But then, what does that mean for the structural definition of class? Can we speak in terms of class when people do not see themselves as members of class, when they do not struggle in terms of class and class organization? The trade unions lost a lot of members. The social democracy left a lot of members. There is not kind of upraising against exploitation, although the working conditions, the life conditions became harder and harder for working class people. And at the same time, what we experienced was the development of new social movements since the 70s and 80s. We experienced all these social movements, new women's movement, the debates on sexism, the problem of the exploitation of nature and how the societal relation to nature is reorganized under capitalist conditions, or what is broadly discussed as a problem of racism related to the problem of anti-Semitism in the German experience, but also related to the whole experience of migration and the way how migrants have been or still are discriminated in Germany or in Great Britain or in France and so on. And you know all these, I think maybe here in Croatia you have the same discussions like in Germany about the problem of all the refugees on the Mediterranean Sea and these people who are dying there because of the European Union's border policy. So, though these are the issues at stake for the debate on class. And so, in my eyes, so we have two possibilities to deal with the problem. On the one side, in the left, you have this idea to say the working class is integrated. So we shouldn't refer any longer to class, because the capitalism works without class. It's still reproducing itself in a way of an automaton. It's a self-valorizing mechanism of producing a surplus and profit, and that's it. And class doesn't play any role any longer. This is an argument brought by some of the left, and also by sociologists like Ulrich Beck, in his well-known book on risk society in the 80s. On the other side, we can say that, and this is what I'm favoring here, and I want to stress a little bit this argument, that capitalism isn't possible without class and class struggle. So what I propose is that we need to read the whole approach of Marx and Marx's analysis of the political economy of capitalism. We need to read it in terms of class struggle. It's not only a kind of a self-valorizing subject producing profit, but the very idea here is to say that class struggle is what Marx called the cornerstone, der Schlussstein. I don't know whether this is the right English word. A door, and then you have the stone, right in the middle of the door, and this keeps all the stones together. You have this, you understand the picture, and this is the cornerstone. And so class struggle for Marx, when he speaks in these terms, he says class struggle is this kind of cornerstone, that brings all the aspects of the reproduction of the social together, so that's the idea. So class struggle is mediating the whole of the social processes. There is no production infrastructure, there is no wage labor, there is no plan, there is no office, there is no planning, without the idea that it is a kind of how the appropriation of surplus value of the social wealth is organized. So everything in that way is seen as a way how people are expropriated by the way how the production apparatus in our society is organized. So to speak, the social structure, the production structure in our society is in itself class struggle. Class struggle doesn't mean people running outside on the street having red flags, and fighting with the police. Class struggle means the way how they produce in their everyday life, the wealth of a country, or how they organize the production, how they are related in the everyday work with each other, how they are subordinated to the commands, yeah, of directors, and so on and so on. And these different relationships are part of what I would see as class struggle, but that means class struggle has to be seen as a very differentiated, has to be discussed or seen as a very different, many and differentiated relationships between people. So this is the way to see that classes are always in relation of a compromise. It's not only a kind of a linear domination from above, so that one class controls and dominates the other class, but it's always a relationship between these two classes. And it's important to say that, in my eyes, referring to Antonio Gramsci's work on social compromise and hegemony, it says that that it is not only the question that people are oppressed and exploited, but it is more important to know how that takes place. The how question is more important than the question of why. Yeah, that is so, in a way, I think, what is an important aspect of Gramsci's contribution. The way of how it is organized. And so what, in following his argument, I would say that capitalist societies are always kind of organized compromises. So to speak, that when classes exist only in class struggles, so there is not a class, and then in the next step, it goes to class struggle, but the class, it is in itself constituted by class struggle and in class struggles, and that means it's always a kind of a balance of forces. To have a certain class or a conjuncture of class means, and it's always a kind of a compromise between classes. So to say that class, and this is the main argument, class is, in my eyes, something that has to be understood as a political category. It's not an economic or technical category, yeah, like the managerial or the technological class or the structural defined class, but it's a political category. Yeah, it's defined by and through the ways how people interact and struggle with each other in those different fields of production and services and so on. How they organize in trade unions or not. How they organize their everyday life. How they struggle for higher wages, for social standards, for the way how they organize, and are they able to have a kind of a political party? Are they able to organize and to attract people to social movements? All this is part of class struggle, you know, so in my eyes. And yeah, to come back to the new social movements, the problem then in this debate is to understand class as something defined by political action is confronted with the difficulty that there are a lot of social movements since the 60s and 70s and 80s and so on, we experiencing a lot of social movement, new social movements, and these social movements, it's not possible to explain them and define them with categories of class, and that's a big difficulty for Marxist or for left theory. And maybe you are in a way familiar with this approach of Ernesto Laclau, who introduced a whole series of concepts to give an idea how to deal with this problem of new social movements and to get rid of the shortcomings and pitfalls of class theory. Because in his argument, I'm not sure, I'm just how much I should go into the details, because Laclau is in a way very abstract and is referring to the whole background of semiology, but to a few sentences maybe can help to give you an idea what I mean with this, because what he wants to argue is that you can, when you have this distinction between the structural, that means class based in economic structural relations, it can't explain how people act, how people live, how the consciousness of these people is organized. So for him, and also for others in the tradition of cultural studies, it's important to understand that the way how people interpret their way of life is something that is not causal depending on the structural basis of the way of living. So that means, though Laclau introduces some semiological concepts, to understand the way how people interpret their activities, and that means he speaks of signifiers. So everything has to be seen under the perspective of what it means for the people, what the sense of social relations are for those people. But the consequence of this argument is that he says it is not at all clear whether a person is a member of working class or is a woman or is a black or white person, because being white, being a man, being a working class person is just a signifier. It's a cultural meaning of the way how I live. Though there is no priority to the structural definition of a person. It's everything depends on the discursive process defining or organizing the meaning of the way how people are constituted as subjects in the social field. With this argument, he denies the importance or any role of the class concept, because he says that class is an old-fashioned concept and related or associated with a misunderstanding that everything what we think and how we act is depending on structural on a structure of the production. So what he wants is to get rid of those structural causality and to arguing that the way how we constitute ourselves is contingent and depending on discursive processes that constitute us as subjects related to a kind of self-definition of whiteness or sex and gender and so on and so on. So different identities. Yeah, so he changes the project to, or transforms the project of a structural approach to a discursive approach. This helps in my eyes. This helps, or is a step to understand better these new social movements. Yeah, this is what I want to say, that it helps, but I don't follow Ernesto Laclau in this argument when he says that class is old-fashioned, because he does not give any explanation for his idea that class is in a way not able to organize the discursive process of how we are constituted. He says only race and class, race and gender are the important discursive processes organizing all these signifiers with a kind of a coherent hegemony. So his argument is that what we do have is a kind of a plurality of emancipatory processes, but class doesn't play any role any longer. So what is said by people like bell hooks, class, in the whole mantra of class, gender, and race, class then seems to be the uncool subject. Yeah, this is a kind of a criticism to bring back in the concept of class, and this is what I arguing for here too, that class is constitutive for domination and can organize, can hegemonize discursive practices, identities. So, yeah, it's not only gender or race or ecological issues, but it's also class. But in fact, there is some empirical evidence, of course, that class doesn't organize the way how people today are aware of their social relations. The class issue is nothing very important in our context. I mean, maybe it's here in Croatia different, but I don't believe that. I mean, but when coming from a German context, I would say it's very difficult to bring in class issues, yeah? Because everybody thinks, okay, when he tries to bring in class issues, he means it's structural, it's causal, it's predetermined by production, the relations of production. But when you follow the argument, and I hope with my English I could give you some idea what my thrust in the argument is that I want to say that class is in itself a kind of a political process to organize the discursive processes and to organize the way how class relations are organized. So in a way it's performative, yeah, to argue that we do live in a class society. To argue in that way has one important consequence in my eyes. Now the left party in Germany, yeah, has the problem that the social structure of the constituency of the left party, the voters, is not in a way class-based. I mean, it's not at all clear. We have the left party has some voters with a tradition of the former GDR, and then a lot of people of, how to say, well-skilled people, yeah, organized in the trade unions. But those people, the most important people for the left party, the very poor and precarious people, yeah, so the poorest part of the working class people, they do not vote for the left party, you know. So the most part, let's speak of, let's say, 5, 6, 7 million voters, they do not vote for the left party. So the left party has to organize these people because no other party would do it, except the right-wing parties like Pegida and the Alternative for Germany. Maybe you follow a little bit these German debates. So this is a very dangerous situation, like everywhere in Europe, that the right populist parties are able to organize, with populist and nationalist political programs, these poor parts of the working class. And so what we're discussing about in the Rosa Luxemburg Stiftung now is how to elaborate or how to elaborate new forms of class-based politics, But have this in mind, to refer to class politics, has always this difficulty to be related to this kind of unpolitical, determining power of structural relations. And so, in my eyes, it's important to elaborate this in a new perspective of a political understanding of the class concept. And that means, and this is the last point, and then I will stop here at this point, class politics in the history or in many periods of history, class politics had the meaning to reduce all members of society to working class people, to be part of the rural class, being part of the working class, or being part of the bourgeoisie, the dominating class. So it's reducing many aspects of everyday life, of identity aspects of persons, and it was ignoring many other aspects of people. That means sexist violation, harassment, the ecological destructiveness of capitalism, the problem of racism, and so on. So you have this in mind. So in my eyes, class politics today has to go back to an idea of the early Marx, when he was arguing, in a text in 1843, saying that the task of working class politics is to overcome any class. So it's not to reduce people to class, but to overcome any class. And that means class politics today has the task to organize a process of universality. That means to produce a kind of hegemony that extend the concept of class in such a way that class not only includes the aspect of production and domination in the relation of production, but also includes the aspect of the relation of gender and sex, and also includes the relation of the manual labor and mental labor, and also includes the appropriation of nature. And to give you an idea, because maybe it's not so evident at that moment, that what I do is I refer here to some considerations in a book of Horkheimer and Adorno, and also of some pieces of the late Foucault, when Horkheimer and Adorno in the dialectics of enlightenment, when they argue that the ruling class is constituted at the very moment, it's a co-constitutive process. To rule people, that means to command people, to dominate them, to subordinate them, means you have to be unsensitive, you have to be cool, you have to be brutal, yeah? You have to be a male person. This is, you constitute, that's what they say. The argument is people constitute themselves as male persons when they want to dominate others, it's not the biology of the sex. It's a social behavior. It's a social attitude to behave as a man, to be in a way brutal and commanding others, dominating them. So that means what I want to say is, for us it's very important to understand that how ruling people, how do they constitute themselves to be able to command others. That's, in my eyes, something very important to understand how they constitute themselves as men, also male persons. What makes them able to harass people, children or women? What makes them able to be warriors? What makes them able to be leaders in a corporation or in the military? This is the question. And what Adorno and Horkheimer and also Foucault have in mind, or what they're arguing for, is that the ruling class is co-constituted by all these elements of domination. It's not only the organization of the production, the appropriation of wealth, it's also the kind of the gender relation, the way how the nature is exploited and dominated, the way how technology and science is organized, and also how people are discriminated in terms of race, of nation, of ethnicity, of religion. So domination, in terms of understood in terms of class, means in the way how Marx saw it, and this is why I refer to this argument, that class in his eyes, proletarians, means that it's a kind of a universal form of emancipation. It's a universal signifier. That means all relations of domination has to be overcome by the fact that it is named as class. Because for him, and this is, I think, what could be important for us today, that capitalist social relations are integrating, are absorbing all historical forms of domination. And class, and the idea that class should overcome any form of domination, means that class, for a very short historical moment, is the universal class that is able to overcome any historical form of domination as far as we experienced during the last 6,000 years. So thank you for your attention. Yeah.
So we have now time for questions and comments. But usually people are shy in the beginning, so then I'll start and then probably normally someone else then follows on. So I'll try something which probably some Slovenian authors would call an attempt at a defense of lost causes. So of lost causes. Okay. Like Žižek books, in defense of lost causes. So what I will basically try to argue before, and then I'm curious to your response, would be that maybe not to give up on the relevance of the structural class theory entirely. And I'll try to explain it also with reference to Pavla. So I would agree that part of the crisis of class theory, of Marx, historical Marxist class theory, lay basically in the fact that a structural class analysis, whereby we identify someone as proletarian, that is precisely someone who is basically his existential position is in social position is defined by the imperative to sell one's labor power to someone else. And without this, of course, this is constituting for the capitalist relation. Without proletarians, there can be no capitalism. Insofar, it's inherent in even the Marx's general formula of capital, because that includes commodities, which can be then means of production, and labor power. Labor power, you already have a reference to class in the most abstract formalization, Marxist formalization of the capitalist mode of production. So, but what was then assumed, and one could probably say, partly also by Marx, was that this structural position would necessarily or automatically lead to political subjectivation along class lines. So, and this is basically what has been, this automatism that has been assumed, that once you're a proletarian in the structural sense, that you would automatically, politically, that you would conceive of yourself as your social and political identity along class lines, was something that may have been plausible in the 19th century, with the upsurge of the workers' movement, the organizations and social democracy and union and so on. But it lost a certain plausibility, and of course historically, the new movements, the new social movements in the 60s, well, people were not subjectivized primarily along class lines, quite the opposite, as you have pointed out. And this is, of course, where people like Mao entered, their criticism enters. And as far as I understand Lacan's argument, it was like to say, okay, the Marxist argument for the privileged status of class, to understand the capitalist society, would mean that every form of political subjectivation would have to be shown to be based along, on structural class criteria. And since we can prove that this is not the case, class has lost its privileged status. It's just one among many others potential elements of political subjectivation. So this, but what I would argue then, first about Lacan. Well, I think that it's of course demanding too much of class theory to assume that it has to explain everything, even of structural class theory. But so not to go into that now, I would say that there is still a problem. So I would say, if you take the title of the book seriously, Hegemony and Socialist Strategy, then the question is not, can people in capitalist societies be subjectivized without reference to class? Can they behave primarily as blacks, or as homosexuals, as women, as I don't know, as the people? But the question is, if our aim from the left is socialism, or if it is really a question of socialist strategy, then class is the one thing that in these chains of equivalences that cannot be left out. You cannot problematize capitalism without reference to class, because it's constituted of it. Yeah. You can, it can start anywhere. As women, if there is no, you can be subjectivized politically as a woman or as a black without any reference to socialism. But once you enter, we have that, liberal mainstream feminism in the United States. But you cannot, from a perspective of socialist perspective, not from abstract theory of political subjectivation, where you can show that people can be subjectivized along many other lines, regardless of whether you start with as the people or the black community and so on, in the United States in the 60s, Black Panthers or so on. If you really, your aim is socialism, you have to you basically are addressing the given mode of production as it exists now, as capitalism, and that cannot be done without class. So I would argue that insofar as we argue along socialist lines, there is a sense in which class is privileged, not privileged in terms of it is always dominant or it is always the prime form of political subjectivation, but this is the one element in social strategy which you cannot leave out, unlike any other. So that would be my argument for as far as like goes. But then maybe broader than that, if you're talking about, if you take classes as primarily a criteria of political subjectivation or as a performative, then the question is, and this would be my question, my methodological question, but how do we then explain the plausibility of such an interpellation? Why do people accept? What does it? Why do people accept, let's say, their interpellation as class subject? What is it that makes such interpellations plausible or implausible, or relatively plausible or implausible? Because there are many ideological interpellations. People respond to some, to others. Then you have to ask the question: what makes certain interpellations more plausible than others? If you assume, if you take out the reference to the structural definition of class, that is, a materialist analysis, you're basically left with, I would say, an idealist assumption that ideology can sufficiently produce or guarantee the conditions of its own plausibility. And then you have a circular, discursive, theoretical, or idealist argument. But I think that the question would be, what makes certain, what makes class the immediate experience, which is structured by class, regardless of whether I conceive myself primarily as a class subject. That is the definition, the question that I have to solve my labor mode, because the question of all the precarities that this involves in contemporary capitalism, that is the material basis for the plausibility of my interpellation as class subject. It doesn't guarantee its success, but if we leave it completely out, structural class, this refers to structural class theory, I think that we are throwing out the baby with the bathwater, and we are conceding too much ground to Laclau and people like that. So, to sum up, I think that the left can criticize earlier naive assumptions that structural class analysis is sufficient to explain political subjectivation. Historically, we know that that is not true, but I don't think that we have to go so far as to eliminate structural class analysis at all, because then we don't need Marx. Then for our political subjectivation, we don't need Das Kapital at all,
Yeah. Okay, this is a difference. What is the procedure here? Should I answer directly, or should we collect some other?
Well, I think since there were many candidates, and this was a very long question to motivate others, maybe we can now, and then others can follow.
Okay, good. Now, I start with the second one, because this is, it's right to the point. You are right. I'm arguing, it's not a concession to Laclau I make. I'm more radical than Laclau. And for me, in my eyes, Laclau is not consequent enough. And I would say that, yes, class is a performative. Yeah, it's a way how we, theory is part of class struggle, and Marxism, and the way how Marx wrote the book Capital, he wrote it explicitly. It's a missile, He wrote a missile, a very strong missile against the bourgeois way of defining and seeing the world. It's a kind of a weapon. And for him it was clear that it is not only an analysis of capitalist society, but it's the very first sentence. When you look at all these introductions to Wilhelm Wolff, my comrade and friend in the fight of the proletarians against, and then what is the aim of capital is the explanation of a society in which the capitalist mode of production is dominating the civil society, the bourgeois, also die bürgerliche Gesellschaft, what in German means both, the bourgeois and the civil society, So, so in my eyes, it's a kind, it's a performative, and it says, yeah, we interpolate people, and and you do this not with moral arguments, not with theological arguments, but you argue with theoretical arguments. So what makes things very difficult, because you have to convince people that it is worth to accept these arguments as true arguments, proved by empirical facts and so on. Yeah. So it's a kind of a circular argument. You are right. I mean, but you look, in my eyes, it is like this. Theory is part of the social struggle. I mean, to refer to the concept of truth, to say this is objectivity, this is a theory that is valid and it is truth, means you want to convince people, but all empirical data wouldn't help to convince people, And this is, in my eyes, an important experience what the critical theory made in the 30s, the failure of enlightenment. People are anti-Semitic, without any empirical experience. Experience doesn't mean anything for people, They have the experience of Jews as neighbors, and these people are nice, but nevertheless they are in favor for bringing them to the concentration camp. They don't care. I mean, the experience means nothing, and that's the reason why I would say that class, it as a political concept, means, yes, to organize people and organize their self-awareness and the way how they act in the context with other people, So, yeah, okay. This is, I think, also an answer of, because I agree with your argument that, Laclau and Mouffe, it's a kind of an abuse, a misuse of the concept of socialism. And then, in a way, they never came back to this. After this book written in 85 or 86 on hegemony, then, for them, socialism shifted to a concept of radical democracy, and radical democracy had the meaning for them that any form of hegemony and totalization of nodal points always again are dissolved. So, and that's it. So from one process of totalization to the next one. That's the process. And I wouldn't agree with that. I would say socialism means that it is a next step in the development of humankind, I would say this is a new way of organizing production, organizing the whole articulation of the society as a whole. And this includes not only the way how we reorganize the production, but we also reorganize the relation between cities and rural, also countryside, how we reorganize the relation between sexes and gender, how we reorganize the way how we reproduce ourselves as species, the way how we organize our generativity, so and so on and so on. So it includes many aspects in the way of how we organize the universality of the way how we live, and the former tradition of class is in a way very reductive, and that's, I think, what is how to say? I think there was a very strong claim in the Marxist debate, but then, and it has to be explained why there is so much reductionism in this tradition. But there is reductionism, I mean, these people have been aware of the fact that working class people have been at that time children and women. But when you read Capital Volume 1, you see that Marx always speaks of male craftsmen. Yeah?
Not in the footnotes.
Right. When he is citing the reports of the parliament, and that's interesting. But the image is it's men, working class. Are men, and this is a problem. How this kind of reductionism can explain, and how we can gain again this kind of universalism, what is in my eyes necessary. The class politics and the project of class. What I try to say is that referring to Laclau's idea, of a kind of a universal signifier means that all these different forms of emancipation should be integrated or come together in a way that we can overcome all these forms of domination we know today. Maybe there will be others, but these forms of domination we know nowadays, that's important to overcome. And this is, I think, what is the task, the next step we have to reach, the threshold we have to pass, So, okay.
I have two questions. The first one, for me, one of the most annoying thing of being or declaring yourself as a Marxist, when you meet some new people and they ask you what is your political position, and you say I'm a Marxist, they start to laugh, ha, the working class, where is the revolutionary working class, the working class is voting for this and these idiots, blah, blah. And for me, somehow, in the beginning was all what to say now, but the answer is exactly, because in terms of defending this structural, somehow to revert your argument, defending this structural explanation of class struggle, because with the structural explanation of class struggle, of course there was in the history of Marxism in the history of Marxism, this kinds of revolutionary reductionism that we were mentioning that was all the time. But I think that we can use this structural analysis not in terms of just opening up the space for the political analysis, because if we, through this structural analysis, when we can see all the constraints there in terms of what are the perspectives and maneuver space to organize the working class, and why, in terms of that, of these difficulties, the working class respond to some kind, let's say, more immediate interests or different interpolations Stipe was talking about. I think that from that perspective, not to use structural analysis as a mechanical way. Okay, this is the working class, and then that's the only way. If it's not, if there is no political subjectivization, that this analysis doesn't work. I think it works exactly how to explain why this political subjectivization in class lines it's hard and difficult. So I think it's I think more theoretical and politically productive to use it in this way, how to explain in a sense why working class in some extent are accepting ideologies that are let's say contradictory to their class interests or stuff like that, because with the structural analysis we can see what are the difficulties of organizing, because you have on the structural analysis you can see there is competition between the workers for the working places, that is what is time resources to organize all this. With all this stuff we can understand why there let's say constant failures in terms to organize working class, and to see what are the reasons that are some ideologies in this structural framework are more plausible for the workers or not, in terms of short-term, mid-term, or long-term interest. So I think there is a valid point for the political usage of structure analysis, and also in terms when you say, not just you, but in terms that we cannot use class to analyze the class perspective to analyze everything social movements. It's okay, you cannot use it in terms of there is no mechanical linear way between class position and political subjectivation, but we can see, let's say, analyze why are there in most of the social movements. So here in Croatia, something is 78 why are the most middle class people in these ecological and those movements. So there's no immediate class analysis, but you cannot understand it without some kind of class perspective. You can use class perspective in different layers of analysis. And the third thing about this, what we're saying about that experience doesn't matter, and we're talking about the Jews and the German Turks. I think, of course, there is a point if their only social experience is experience with the Jews, there is their neighbors. Well, they also experience economic crisis, and there's also no explanations for the economic crisis. The Jews, not just Jews, but any kind of in these situations, Jews do not function as a contradictory experience to compare with some others, but they function as an explanation for some other experiences. So they are isolated as of course they are not experienced, but I think we cannot say that because we have to look at other experiences which for those people cannot be explained in structural or systemic terms. In that way, the Jews function as a moment of explanation, not some experience to be valid.
And just to add to that point, historically, it's interesting that the votes of the NSDAP after the economic recovery in the Weimar Republic after 1924 started to drop dramatically. And only after 29, after the big crash again then the NSDAP vote started to rise again. But Hitler never changed his mantras, but at some periods they appealed to certain people, to a certain number of people, and under different socioeconomic conditions. And there is a relation between crisis and the appeal that it presented. So there is an element of experience, of immediate experience there.
Okay, I didn't get the second point, but let me come back to the first one. The problem of structural analysis and constraints. This was your basic argument. And I mean, look, what I'm interested in is, I do this kind of research on how accumulation of finance capital works, So I'm interested in the logic of the reorganization of accumulation dynamics, and so on. But but you could say or argue in that way that when I publish these articles, or you read this in the newspapers. Maybe you had this in the newspapers here too. During the last 2 years, that means from 12 to 14, the 930 billionaires worldwide, 930 new billionaires, that collected their money, their assets since the middle of the 90s, 900 persons. They doubled their income in these 2 years from $2.7 trillion to $5.6 trillion in 2 years. 930 persons. So, and now you go to a trade union meeting, or you go to a left party meeting, or you go, like me, to ATTAC, and I say, look people, it's really awful these few people own so much resources of our world, yeah? And everybody would say, yeah, okay. And then we start to organize some manifestations against the European Central Bank, and maybe when we are lucky, perhaps 10,000 people coming. So the biggest trade union in Germany, the public service trade union, or the second, they have about 2.5 million members. Yeah, the service trade union. They organize their members to come to this manifestation, and nobody comes. Yeah. So, and the problem is, what does it mean when we have the explanation? You know, I believe that my explanation of the economic crisis since 2008, based on Marxist concepts, is a very good explanation. And of course there are many others, and so we're discussing and we have all these debates, very conflicting debates on how the crisis can be explained. But this is a scientific problem. But always connected and associated with this, the way how to explain the crisis, it's always also a kind of a performative action in the way that, you know, that I intervene in debates and say, look, this is the concrete regime of truth. This is the way how we should explain it, because this enables us to act. You know, and not that way, you know, and the other ways, you know, how people explain it wouldn't work to mobilize, to organize, because it's separated from their everyday way of thinking. And I'm interested to reshape the theoretical approach in such a way that it is intervening in the way how people see it in their everyday life. So it has to be connected to other problems, other contradictions. And what you mean by the concept of experience, I would say yes. I mean, it's a way of experiencing the whole of everyday life. When I say, yeah, it has the way of explaining the economic crisis has to be universalized in a way that it also includes the problem of sexual harassment, the problem of ecological disaster, and so on. So what I did in 2011, after the debates we had in Attac, Germany, and in the Rosa Luxemburg Foundation, I edited a book on the multiple crises. The crisis is, this crisis from 2008, we still live in this crisis. It's not over. I mean, not at all. This is a multiple crisis. It's climate, it's desertification, it's the pollution, it's water, yeah, it's a shrinking of diversity, and so on and so on. Yeah, it's and then people, yeah, friends of mine, very familiar with the Marx tradition, said, yes, you are right, but nothing new under the sky, because all crises, big crises, system crises before, have been multiple crises. Yeah, that means crisis of family, of subjectivity, of the rural, the countryside, the farmers, the labor markets. But what is interesting is that the tradition never discussed it as multiple crises. That means with a non-reductionist way of approaching the crisis. And that's what my point in here. Yeah, that, you know, to say it's performative means that it's not only about structural analysis, but how to bring in the way how how we bring in the structural analysis in the in this field of ongoing debates, and the debates are not neutral. It's not, in a way, academic. Even academic discussions, I mean, with a German background, academic discussions is always about class struggle. I mean, you know, when my tradition is critical theory, these people have been expelled, being Jews and Marxists. Yeah, the risk was to be killed by the Nazis or to go to exile to the United States. I mean, so, you know, teaching. I mean, when you say in Germany you are a Marxist, you wouldn't be allowed to teach. I mean, that's a fact today. I mean, I have not a regular position in Germany. Yeah, I'm a professor in Frankfurt, but it's only a title. It's without pay. You know, I can teach as much as I want, but without pay, you know? And I mean, that's how it is, you know? And so the way how we do analysis is in itself a way how we struggle in this field of knowledge. That's my argument. But this also has an impact, a repercussion on the theory itself. You know, because then you are aware that theory is nothing neutral. Yeah, it's not only only structural in that way. And you know, the third argument about experience, I mean, is very close to this problem because, you know, for critical theory, the experience to say that Germans or Americans who are in contact with Jews, or now what we experience in Germany, you know, that people who are in contact with migrants, many of them are racist, still racist. I mean, sometimes it has some impact and sometimes not. So you can't say that the personal contact helps to overcome prejudices. That's not true. So it depends on the ideological context in which the personal experience helps to overcome, prejudices. And so what, you know, for people like Adorno and Horkheimer, and maybe also for you, I mean, you know, when you think, okay, look, here are the empirical data. It's so evident, it's obvious that the things are in that way or should be seen in that way. And people don't do it. They don't care about the empirical facts. Yeah? I mean, people eat meat, although they know, and you can read it in the newspapers every day, that, you know, the way how we produce meat is destructive for us, you know, in Germany. You know, people do it. And I mean, you know, so you can, what does it mean? Enlightenment is failing. You know, I mean, the argument doesn't work. And you can repeat it and you can repeat it. And the problem is how to establish a context, and that's my problem, in which arguments and theories are convincing. So what you call the interpellation, that people feel interpellated by the theory, the truth itself, you know, and you can't just come to this result by arguing, okay, look, here is a true Marxist argument. Nobody would care. And so, for that reason, I argue the theory in itself is class struggle, is performative, and it is organizing. The theory in itself is an organizing practice. And that is true even in academic terms. When you see when Adorno came back to Germany after exile, he said, okay, the Nazis killed all the tradition of Marxist and critical thinking in the German tradition. What we have to do in the German context, the West German context, is to recruit young people becoming familiar with the whole tradition of Kant, Hegel, Marx, Nietzsche, Freud. All this, what was ignored, what was killed, what was expelled at that time, and it took him 20 years that young people became familiar with all this Marxist stuff, again, with Lukács and Korsch and Marx and so on and so on. So it is a kind of it's not only something you can do in an objectivist way of, look, here we have our analysis, a structural analysis, but it's part of the process. And that's my argument. So, but of course, it's not a moral argument. It's you have to do this in, like Marx said it. I mean, here is Rhodos. Here you have to do it. I mean, this is a concrete analysis, of course. So the second point I didn't get, but maybe you can add it, or maybe others now.
Let me start with a remark from Antique. Socrates knew more than 2,000 years ago that you come to teach people anything because people are capable to understand something themselves. On the empirical level, people know. I was 20 years here in the unions, so I have also a practical experience. People know on the empirical level that they are work dependent, they are wage dependent, and so on. But it is not fashionable to be a member of working class, of dirty working class. It is quite nicer to identify as a member of middle class and so on. We know that the ruling class owns not only means of material production, then also means of ideological production. So the production of ideology, of consent and so on is in the contemporary world developed to such a huge extent than never before. But on the other side, why people are not ready, especially on the left, especially in the West, to organize, to fight, and so on, to participate in some manifestations, demonstrations, and so on. They still have a hope. It's also a very big point of dominant ideological system. They still have a hope that things will be fixed somehow by someone inside this world, inside this structure, this mode of production. So it is not my personal duty. I still have possibilities of consumption, of private life, and so on. In my opinion, this is a crucial point why we still not have a real big contemporary emancipatory movements, especially in the developed countries and also in developing countries, unfortunately too, because this fact that people still have a hope to manage the crisis and their everyday life somehow, without a big risk, without a big fight and so on. It is, unfortunately, an indicator that I reflect now also on Marx theorem, the existing mode of production, capitalist mode of production, despite of these terrible consequences in people's life, in world war and peace situation, and so on, this system, unfortunately, is not exhausted their potential of further development. So our further analysis and actions should be, in my opinion, to be directed to research how existing crises, which are limits of existing crises, and which are possible ways to research situation, to give people some other emancipatory projects, because all projects, all methods of organization, of strategy and tactics and so on are quite exhausted, and we don't have new ones capable to answer to this global situation.
Yeah, I agree with this point, the last point, that we have in the Stiftung, in the foundation in Berlin, we have a lot of discussions exactly on that point of what is transformation strategies, what are the entry projects, with which people can experience a different mode of everyday life, public transport or schooling or energy production and energy self-administration, these kind of things. So there is a lot of debate on this. Because, the problem is that, what you propose is in one aspect very radical, because to have a party or to have a social movement is a strategy or a way to organize people, and maybe you are right, this is exhausted. These are models that are exhausted. But the problem is that, like the Luxembourg Stiftung is depending on the fact there is a parliamentarian party. There wouldn't be any money for the Luxembourg Stiftung without a parliamentarian party. So, so we have to, how to say it, this is without an alternative. Because if we want to continue with the way how we discuss about all these problems, we need a kind of a framework that is depending on some maybe exhausted political forms of organization. And so in my eyes, it's really a kind of a dilemma, because at the same time when we discussing in favor of, or we see it as a problem that we have to be organized in a parliamentarian party, like the Left Party in Germany, many people are so critical about the whole party system as being more a problem than part of the solution, So, there are a lot of dilemmas your argument is touching. And I don't know if you are right that people have the hope that someone will fix the problems. I'm not sure. in Germany, and maybe this is also true here in your country, I mean, the problem is that socialism is discredited. Yeah, there is so much discussion about the failures of state socialism as people experienced it in East Germany. And look what it is now with Russia. You know, what is, for me, it was really, pitiful in a way to experience the following problem. You know, the Germans killed about 27 million people in Russia during the World War II. And the Red Army came to Germany and liberated these people in the concentration camps. Yeah? And in the crisis during the last 2 years, Germans, with goodwill and human attitude, sent care parcels to Russia, you know, food, clothes, and so on. And then some people in the Russian media said, who did win the war? We or them? Yeah, they paid with so much blood the victory about the Germans. And finally, the Nazis won the war. I mean, look how it is. I mean, you know, there is a strong continuity of the German model of controlling Europe. I mean, you know, and we are so critical about it in Germany ourselves, the left, yeah? But you could say, yes, in a way, I mean, it's not the same project as the Nazis was going to fulfill, but, you know, but anyway, I mean, you know, for Germans, they could say, why socialism? Yeah, why socialism? Because, okay, we lost the war, everything was destroyed, but finally, it was a big success. Yeah, the German economy is so successful and is controlling all the economy in Europe. And even now we can send food parcels to Russia, yeah, and help these poor people. You know what I mean? How cynical the history is developing. I mean, you know, and that means socialism is confronted with this kind of difficulty because people say, what do you want? You know, the socialism is not effective, it's not innovative, it's not democratic. Maybe it's not democratic in Germany neither today. Yeah, people like very much China, grows without democracy, grows without any democratic blockages, so you know, one of the former ministers from the Social Democracy said, presenting the plan for new airports and highways, and so he said he would like to have a constellation like in China, without all the problems of procedures, protests of citizens and so on, just having more growth in Germany. Not only 3%, 8%, 10%, without all these problems, you know. So, and you know, and in this context, in my eyes, it's very difficult to give people the idea, that's not the way we can continue with. I mean, that's the problem. We cannot continue with. Because people have to understand that it's not possible, it's not sustainable to go on that way, you know. And so people have to. It's like a kind of a Walter Benjamin attitude. It's an emergency brake, you know. We have to stop it in a way, you know. But then you have to give people exactly what you said with your third point. We have to give people an idea of alternatives, of democratic alternatives. And the left and the socialist tradition has to go through its own history and to find out why democracy failed in so many parts of its own history, and how we can do it better than the other camp. You know, the representative and parliamentarian democracy want help. I mean, look what we have. It doesn't help. I mean, it doesn't solve the problems. Yeah. And that's, we need more radical strategies to contribute to solve all these problems. Yeah. Yes, and workers don't want to be workers, and I don't criticize them for that. I mean, Marxism wants to overcome class society and all those workers' existence. And my father, he was a worker. I mean, he came from Bosnia, and he was a worker all his life long. And he said, yeah, okay, the only way to get rid of this class situation, to live in this way, is he was not a socialist in that way. He thought, okay, the only thing is education. For poor people, education is the only way to overcome the class position. But when you start to identify yourself with your working class position, during the 40s period, people would say, what could be the outcome of that? And so we have to convince people that it is worse, and that needs a strategy, to say, no, it's not education, it's not an individual is a strategy or an individual improvement of life conditions, but it's what we need is something that universalizes, our mode of living. Yeah.
Small addition, if I may.
Very small, because you're a long time.
Namely, the global situation, historical global situation, is in my opinion really dangerous because a ruling global capitalist system can't solve the essential problems economically, socially, ecologically, and so on. On the other side, we don't have functionalized and prepared projects and practical attempts on the level needed. But it is obviously need to use on one side the historical experiences of big social popular movements, not only give to the right this field, and on the other side, use of modern organizing techniques, using not only information technology, but also modern business methods to be functionally equal to the counterpart and so on. But it's a very, very huge sphere of aspects of this normal thing, of course.
Maybe since we're short on time, maybe
very short question. So, what would you say? How much does the usual, traditional, and very anachronistic distinction between the intellectual and manual labor still saturate the Marxist debates on class issues?
Excuse me, which role it plays or still plays?
The distinction between intellectual and manual labor, how much does it still affect the Marxist debates on class?
It doesn't affect it, but that is what I regret very much.
Does it still saturate the debates or not? I mean,
no. I do not know anybody except one person in Austria, Roland Atzmüller, and me myself. Yeah, who is following this line of debate.
But why do we still, when talking about working class, presuppose the physical workers and not, let's say, teachers or shop service workers or something? There are academic workers, such as myself, are also workers. Why do we, at least I hope so, we don't presuppose them as workers when speaking about the working class problems?
Yeah, I mean, there are so many aspects in that. I mean, you know, you have, when you see all the post-operaist discussion, then you have this idea of general intellect, and you have this idea of, you know, new skills, intellectual labor, yeah, service labor, yeah, emotional, also effective labor, and so on. And so, and yeah, and when you, so this is a new way to say that the collective worker, the body of the collective worker transformed very much, deeply. You know, it's not only primitive form of manual labor, but it's including all those jobs, positions you mentioned, you know. And yeah, how to say, my position is a little bit different from that, because what I prefer with related to the arguments of Antonio Gramsci, I wouldn't say that intellectual work is defined by professions. You know, it's not depending on professions like teaching or, I don't know, I mean, these things of work, but intellectual work is defined as a function in society, you know. So, and for that reason, I would say teachers are not workers, you know. So you see, this is really a serious problem then. When you have the post-operists like Negri and Hart, they would say, of course, these people are members or part of the multitude. So these people are part of a new revolutionary, not class, a new formation, a new revolutionary formation, you know, integrating people, yeah, manual labor, intellectual labor, and so on. And I would say no, many of these people have intellectual functions, and they are not part of the multitude and the kind of a working class, but they are part of the domination process. So they are part of the ruling class, you know. I would say, look like the German university. I mean, you know, I would say, yes, in a way, people do a lot of work under precarious conditions, yeah, work conditions. Nevertheless, these people are part of the dominating part of society, you know, still. Also, there are so many students, but you know, what we know now after empirical research, we know that working class students are less successful. They just reach to the bachelor, but not master, and more professorships are going to people from upper class, you know. So I mean, so you could say, yeah, the manual intellectual labor differentiation, yeah, is still kind of a distinction of domination, more than a structural, yeah, differentiation or distinction, yeah. So, is that helpful for you?
Well, in a way.
In a way.
Okay, thank you.
So I think we can end it here. Mm-hmm. Thank you again, Alex, for the lecture and the discussion. And for the rest of you, thank you for coming, and you'll be informed about new events organized by the Center for Labor Studies after the summit. So, thank you again.